Alright guys, today we're going to look at graphing quadratic functions, and you can follow along using your guided notes. Remember, a quadratic function is a function that has an x squared term. Okay? When it's x squared, that's what makes it a quadratic. Alright, a quadratic function can be written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And since it's a function, we can also write it in function notation if you want to write it as f of x. That is the same thing as y. All right, where a, b, and c are real numbers. And a is usually positive. Now, a doesn't have to be positive, but when we want to factor and use our factors, I can't spell, sorry. All right, the graph of a quadratic function is a parabola. A parabola is like a U-shaped graph, like right here that you're seeing. And some key features of parabolas are going to be, okay, so you got ax squared plus bx plus c. When a is blank, the parabola opens up. When a is positive, the graph opens up. And it has a blank value, okay? So it's going to have a minimum value when the graph opens up. It's going to have a minimum value when the graph opens up. When a is negative, the parabola opens down. You can see it opens down here. And it has a maximum value. All right, so the maximum would be at the top, the vertex, and here it would be the minimum here. All right, we are going to scroll on down. Make sure you pause this and get these because I have to clear them to move down each time. All right, so the next part says, all right, your vertex is the highest or lowest is the minimum blank of a parabola. So the vertex is the highest or lowest point. If I can get my pen to write. And the vertex is on the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry, it's an imaginary line. That splits the parabola into two equal halves. So for this one right here, it would be the imaginary line that went through x equals 2. All right, so the vertex on this parabola is going to be the highest point, so 2, 1. So the vertex is at 2, 1. And the axis of symmetry is x, whatever your x is, equals 2. So it goes right down through the center there. All right, if you are given an equation for a parabola instead of a graph, use the equation x equals negative b over 2a. To find the axis of symmetry and then the vertex. Your parabola will have an axis of symmetry at x equals negative b over 2a. Then you plug that x value back in, whatever the equation is, plug it back into your equation, and that will give you the y value of your vertex. All right, again, pause this if you need to. I'm going to clear it so we can move on. right, some key features of a parabola. Y equals 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. Find the axis of symmetry and vertex for this equation. All right, so A is 2, B is 4, and C is 2. All right, so we can find our axis of symmetry by doing negative B over 2A. So we're going to do negative 4 over 2 times A. So that's negative 4 over 4, or negative 1. To find the vertex, plug negative 1 back into the equation. All right, so you've got 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. So the equation's already written out here. All you have to do is plug in negative 1, and then simplify. Remember, you've got to do order of operations, so that means you've got to do powers before you multiply. Negative 1 squared is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. And negative 2 plus 2 is 0. All right, so the parabola will open up because A is positive. And if it opens up, that means the parabola has a minimum value. And it's going to have an axis of symmetry at negative 1. And the vertex is going to be negative 1, 0. All right, pause the video if you need to. I'm going to clear it and move on. All right, the next part says key features of a parabola. Ax squared plus bx plus c. The y-intercept of a parabola is where the graph crosses the y-axis. The y-intercept always has an x value of 0. For a parabola, the y-intercept will be the point zero C. All right, it says key features of parabolas. So we're going to look at 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. It says fill in the y-intercept in addition to what you have already found out. All right, because 2 is positive, we said that this went up, so it means it has a minimum value. The axis of symmetry, I believe that was negative 1. All right, I had to check to make sure, but the axis of symmetry, we did find that equals negative 1. So this is going to be negative 1, and the vertex, negative 1, 0. All right, now we said the y-intercept is 0C, so it's going to be 0, 2 for this point. All right, go ahead and save that. Make sure you've got that written down. We're going to move on. All right, key features of parabolas. Ax squared plus bx plus c. To find the x-intercept of a parabola, factor the quadratic. Set the factors equal to 0. And your solutions represent the x-intercepts. All right, so the first thing we want to do for this function here is pull out our greatest common factor. You can see that each term there has a greatest common factor of 2. So if we pull out 2, we're left with x squared, 2 goes into 4 2 times, and 2 comes out 1 time. Alright, so to factor this, I'm going to have 2 factors of, alright, so what multiplies to give me 1 and adds to give me 2? So my 2 factors are going to be, I'm going to skip this part. I don't like the way that's set up, but I'm going to do x times x, 1 and 1. These are both going to be plus, and that will be my factors. I think this is supposed to be 1 plus 1 equals 2. I think that's what they do when you multiply to get 1 and you add to get 2. This is the way they're looking at that. All right. Fill in the x-intercepts in addition to what you have already found out. All right, I'm going to have to move this down. I should have made this a little smaller, but let's go ahead and clear this. Don't forget what we have here. All right, with your x's, this was 2, this was 2, this was x squared plus 2x plus 1, and this was 2x plus 1, and this was x plus 1. So if you set the factors equal to 0 and solve, you subtract 1 and subtract 1. So our x's are -1. All right, so the axis of symmetry, again, the parabola turns up, means it has a minimum value. Axis of symmetry was at -1. The vertex was at -1, 0. And the y-intercept was 0, 2. The x-intercepts at -1. And the other one is at -1. That means there's really only one. Oh, sorry. -1. That's supposed to be -1, 0. Just replace that with a 0 there, and -1, 0. All right, that means it only has one x-intercept. So let's see what that looks like. So if we're going to graph it, why did I go to 2? I don't know. All right, so I'm going to graph this at -1, 0 is my vertex. I have a y-intercept at 0, 2. I have an axis of symmetry, which is this imaginary line that divides my parabola in half, which means I can reflect this point over and make another point here. I know my parabola turns up, and I'm not very good at drawing curves, but I'm going to try. All right. It does continue on both sides with arrows, because if we continue to choose other x's to plug it in, we could make that graph go in both directions as far as we want. So that's how you graph a parabola. If you have any questions, please let me know.